In the beginning, there was no fire. The world lay shrouded in a soft, endless dusk, where shadows stretched across valleys and mountains in silent dominion. The moon hung pale above a sleeping earth, its faint light trembling across rivers that mirrored the stars but gave no warmth. Humanity, still young and unsure, huddled together beneath the open sky. Their breath was visible in the cold air, curling upward like fading prayers. Nights were long, and fear was an ever-present companion. The cries of unseen beasts echoed through forests, and storms rolled across the horizon like angry gods whispering threats. In those days there was no safety, no certainty, only the endless rhythm of darkness and dawn. People lived close to the earth, surviving by instinct alone. They spoke in gestures more than words, their eyes always scanning for danger. When lightning struck a tree and the wood flared briefly with fire, they watched in awe and terror. The golden glow danced, alive, fierce, and forbidden. For a few moments, it illuminated their faces, wide-eyed, trembling, yearning, and then the rain would come, quenching the miracle before it could be understood. They did not know yet that they were looking upon the future. Prometheus watched them from afar. A titan among titans, he was ancient and wise, born of the first generation of divine beings who had shaped the world before the gods of Olympus claimed their thrones. He saw the mortals and felt something stir within him, something dangerous, something tender. It was not pity, nor mere curiosity, but recognition. In their frailty, he saw reflection, the same longing for purpose, the same spark that drives creation itself. Unlike his kin, who looked down upon mortals as insects crawling across the dirt, Prometheus saw them as incomplete beings, capable of greatness if only they were given a chance. The other gods did not share his view. Zeus, the thunder-wielding ruler of Olympus, saw mankind as a distraction, a noisy experiment barely worth notice. To him, they were reminders of chaos, of weakness, of imperfection that had no place in the perfected order of heaven. He forbade giving them divine gifts. No fire, no knowledge, no art, nothing that might make them rivals to the gods. And so, the mortals lived as shadows, unaware of what they lacked but haunted by an ache they could not name. Prometheus often wandered among them, invisible but present, feeling the weight of their silence. He saw a mother cradle her dying child through a night of freezing wind. He saw hunters return empty-handed, their faces hollowed by hunger. He watched a young man carve meaningless marks on a stone, his hands shaking from the cold, yet determined to make something lasting. Prometheus understood then that the seed of divinity already lived within them, buried but not extinguished. It only needed a spark. The heavens above him were vast and still, but within that stillness he felt restlessness. There is a moment in every story when the heart rebels against reason, when compassion becomes defiance. For Prometheus, that moment began not in thunder or fire, but in quiet empathy. He could not unsee what he had seen. He could not return to the halls of Olympus and pretend that the suffering of mortals was beneath him. The thought consumed him as centuries passed, a thought that whispered in every wind and glimmered in every reflection of starlight. They are capable of more. On one silent night, he descended to a valley where men and women slept in clusters for warmth. Their fires were only dreams, their lives were flickering moments of endurance. He stood among them unseen, and the world seemed to pause. The moonlight touched their faces, revealing innocence and exhaustion. Prometheus reached down and brushed his fingers through the dirt beside them. The soil was cold but pulsed faintly with potential, as though the earth itself waited for something to awaken. He whispered to the sleeping mortals, not in words, but in thoughts older than language. He spoke of light, of creation, of the power hidden within their fragile forms. Somewhere in the depths of their dreams, they heard him. A child stirred and smiled faintly. A woman exhaled, her breath warm against the night air. It was a small thing, yet to Prometheus, it was everything. A promise that hope could be kindled even in the coldest dark. He looked up at the heavens, where the stars burned bright and unreachable. The fire of the gods, radiant and eternal, danced in the sky like a taunt. The boundary between divine and mortal had been drawn long ago, and to cross it would mean defiance of Zeus himself. But Prometheus was no stranger to defiance. He had sided with Zeus once, during the great war of Titans and Olympians, believing the new order would bring wisdom and balance. Yet now he saw that victory had only shifted tyranny's face. The gods were powerful, but they lacked mercy. The mortals were weak, but they possessed something greater: potential, imagination, a hunger for meaning. Prometheus began to wonder what would happen if that potential were given fuel. What if the cold were banished? What if light came not from above, but from within? The thought glowed inside him, dangerous and beautiful. He knew that once begun, such a path could not be undone. The gods would not forgive betrayal, least of all Zeus. Yet he could not let the world remain as it was, a dim cradle of unrealized souls. The night deepened. Winds swept through the valley, bending trees and stirring the ashes of long-dead fires. Prometheus stood tall against the gusts, feeling the pulse of the world beneath his feet. The stars shimmered like the eyes of witnesses, watching, waiting. Somewhere beyond them, the great halls of Olympus glittered in their golden arrogance. And beneath them, the small, fragile creatures of earth dreamt of warmth they had never known. In that stillness, Prometheus made his silent vow. He would not let this world remain in shadow. He would find a way to bring them fire, not merely the flame that burns, but the fire that awakens thought, courage, and creation. The journey would be perilous, the consequences eternal, but the decision was already made. He turned his gaze once more to the heavens, where the forbidden light burned eternal, and whispered to the wind, "Let them be more than they are." Thus began the spark in the darkness, the first flicker of rebellion that would change the fate of gods and men forever. The night held its breath, unaware that a single choice had already set eternity in motion. Before there were men and fire and gods upon their golden thrones, there was chaos, vast, unshaped, eternal. From that swirling void came the first beings, born not of birth but of necessity, the Titans, ancient and immense, each a force of nature incarnate. They were not good nor evil, for such words had no meaning then. They were existence itself, stone and sea, light and darkness given form. Among them was Cronus, who would rise to rule, and his son Zeus, who would one day overthrow him. The heavens and the earth trembled in their making, and the universe became a theater for endless struggle. Prometheus was born in this era, a child of Iapetus the Titan and Clymene the Oceanid. From the moment he opened his eyes, he was unlike the others. Where his brethren were might and storm, he was intellect and foresight. His name itself meant forethought, and it suited him well. He could see beyond the present chaos, to what could be, what should be. Even among immortals, that made him dangerous. The Titans ruled for an age uncounted. Their reign was vast, but heavy with arrogance. They shaped mountains, diverted rivers, and cast stars into the heavens as though scattering sparks from a forge. Yet for all their power, there was a blindness in them, a belief that nothing would ever change. But change is the one law that no god, no Titan can defy. From their very ranks rose the seed of their undoing. Cronus, the mightiest among them, feared the prophecy whispered in the dark, that one of his own children would rise against him. So he devoured them as they were born, swallowing the cries of each newborn god before they could draw their first breath. But his wife, Rhea, could not bear the horror. When her youngest, Zeus, was born, she hid him away in a secret cave on Crete and gave Cronus a stone wrapped in swaddling cloths instead. The Titan king swallowed it without question, sealing his own fate. Zeus grew strong in hiding, nurtured by nymphs, guarded by the sacred goat Amalthea. The sound of his infancy was drowned by the beating of shields, loyal protectors who clashed metal to conceal his cries from his father. When the time came, Zeus returned to face Cronus and fulfill the ancient prophecy. He forced the Titan king to disgorge his swallowed siblings, Poseidon, Hades, Hestia, Demeter, and Hera, each reborn in a storm of light and fury. Together, they rose against the old gods in a war that would shake creation itself. It was called the Titanomachy, the War of Gods and Titans, and it raged for 10 years without cease. Mountains were hurled like stones, seas boiled with fire, and the sky cracked open with lightning that could split worlds. On one side stood the Titans, ancient and immense, fighting to preserve their dominion. On the other, the Olympians, young but cunning, driven by the promise of a new order. Prometheus watched from the threshold between both realms, his heart divided. He was a Titan by birth, yet his mind was drawn to the new god's vision of change. The Titans fought with brute force, clinging to what was, while the Olympians fought with strategy, seeking what could be. In the quiet between battles, Prometheus saw the future forming, one where wisdom would matter more than strength, where order would triumph over chaos. It was then that he made his fateful choice. He defected. With his brother Epimetheus, whose name meant afterthought, he joined Zeus and his siblings, offering counsel and insight. His knowledge of the Titans' tactics became invaluable. He advised Zeus on how to strike where the Titans were blind, how to use cunning against brute power. His mind became a weapon sharper than any blade. The war ended in thunder. Zeus hurled his final lightning bolt, and the Titans fell. The heavens shook, the seas roared, and silence followed, the silence of an ending that felt like the beginning of something vast. The Titans who had defied Zeus were bound in chains of unbreakable metal and cast into Tartarus, the abyss beneath the underworld, where even time dared not flow. Prometheus stood at the edge of that abyss and watched as his kin vanished into shadow. Their cries echoed faintly, not of pain, but of disbelief. They had ruled since the dawn of the world, and now they were no more. He felt no triumph, only the weight of knowing that history had shifted. What had been eternal was now memory. And memory, he understood, was the truest immortality. In the aftermath, Zeus claimed the skies, Poseidon the seas, and Hades the underworld. The world was divided among them, and the age of the Olympians began. The heavens glittered with new order, yet beneath the calm shimmered something darker, the pride of victory, the hunger for control. Zeus ruled from his throne atop Mount Olympus, where the clouds wrapped around his palace like living veils. His voice was thunder, his will law. The new gods built their halls of marble and gold, each embodying an aspect of existence. There was beauty and cruelty in equal measure. They sang of justice but practiced hierarchy. To them, power was not a gift but a birthright. And as the light of Olympus spread across the world, Prometheus felt a growing unease. He had helped them win the war, but in victory, they had begun to resemble those they had overthrown. He often walked alone through the newly ordered world, studying its forms, the mountains shaped anew, the rivers given paths by divine decree. There was peace, yes, but it was a brittle peace, one that left little room for wonder. The gods ruled, but they did not nurture. They created laws but ignored empathy. In the perfection of Olympus, he sensed a void, something vital missing. And then he looked down upon the earth, where life was taking shape. Creatures moved through forests, swam in rivers, crawled from the soil, but they were incomplete. They lacked the spark of purpose. Zeus considered them mere decorations, ornaments to fill the world he had conquered. But Prometheus felt differently. When he saw the first humans, fragile, small, yet curious, he saw a reflection of something divine. He saw potential, unshaped and waiting. Zeus dismissed them, forbidding the sharing of divine gifts. But Prometheus could not forget the war, nor what it had cost. He knew power could corrupt, that the fire of Olympus could burn as easily as it could illuminate. Yet he also knew that without some fragment of that light, the world below would remain unfinished. A stage without actors, a song without voice. The age of Titans had ended, but the true story of defiance had only just begun. In the calm that followed the storm, Prometheus stood between two worlds, bound by loyalty to the gods yet drawn by compassion toward mankind. He had seen creation forged through conflict, and he understood now that creation without love was hollow. The universe had changed through force, now it was time for it to change through mercy. The stars above him still shimmered with the echoes of war, yet in their light he saw a new path forming. He would not fight with thunder or blade. He would fight with something far more dangerous, a gift that could never be taken back. The gods ruled heaven, but Prometheus would claim the hearts of men. The earth was still young when Prometheus descended once more from the heights of Olympus. The wars of gods and titans had ended, and the world lay quiet, its wounds still healing. The mountains stood like sleeping giants, and the seas shimmered with the reflection of a sky that had finally found peace. Yet amid this harmony, there remained something missing, something that made the creation feel hollow, unfinished. The animals roamed freely, the trees stretched toward the heavens, the rivers sang through valleys, but there was no one to listen, no one to wonder, no one to dream. The world was beautiful, but it was silent. Prometheus walked the lands, his feet leaving no mark, his eyes heavy with thought. He felt the pulse of the earth beneath him, the heartbeat of Gaia herself, the great mother who bore all things. Her presence whispered to him through the rustle of leaves, through the sigh of the wind, and through the rhythm of waves upon the shore. She told him that life was abundant but lacked meaning. There was vitality without consciousness, movement without purpose. The beasts lived and died in cycles of instinct, unaware of the beauty surrounding them. Prometheus felt the ache of that truth, and in that ache was the seed of an idea, one that would alter the course of eternity. He began his work in the valley of Parnassus, where the soil was soft and rich, nourished by the tears of ancient rains. There, upon the banks of a quiet river, Prometheus knelt. Around him, the world seemed to hold its breath. He reached into the mud, feeling its cold weight between his fingers. Slowly, deliberately, he began to shape. His hands, steady and divine, pressed and molded the earth, drawing form from formlessness. First the limbs, slender and fragile. Then the chest, the curve of a spine, the delicate rise of shoulders. He shaped a face with care, a brow that could furrow with thought, eyes that could reflect wonder, a mouth that could smile, weep, or speak truth. Hours passed, or perhaps centuries. Time moved differently in the realm of divine creation. When at last he stepped back, there lay before him a figure unlike any other creature upon the earth. It was not the strongest nor the swiftest, but it was beautiful in its fragility. Prometheus looked upon his creation with quiet reverence. It was neither god nor beast but something in between, a bridge between heaven and earth. He called them anthropos, the ones who look upward. But the form was still cold, still lifeless. Clay without soul. Prometheus studied it and felt the pull of the elements around him. The air that breathed through the mountains, the fire that glowed at the heart of the earth, the water that shimmered beneath the sunlight. He understood then that to awaken this being, he must give a piece of the divine itself. So he knelt once more, pressing his lips gently to the earthen brow, and breathed. The first breath of life entered the clay figure. The chest rose, hesitated, then fell again. Prometheus breathed a second time, slower, deeper. The third breath came like a sigh, and with it, the miracle occurred. The clay softened into flesh, color bloomed beneath the skin, and the figure shuddered, opening its eyes. They were wide and clear, reflecting both sky and soil, a mirror of both heaven and earth. The being sat upright, trembling, confused, but alive. Prometheus watched in silence, or replacing his usual calm. The man looked at his hands as if discovering himself for the first time. He touched the grass, the stones, the air, and then gazed upward, drawn instinctively toward the light. Prometheus felt something stir within him, a pride he had never known. In that moment, the act of creation became love. He did not stop there. Beside the first, he formed another, a companion. This time, the shape was softer, the gaze gentler, the breath warmer. When she awoke, her first sound was a quiet laugh, carried like music on the wind. Together, the two looked around at the world with wonder. They reached for each other's hands, and Prometheus saw the spark of something divine flicker between them, connection. It was not commanded, not imposed. It was born from recognition, the same recognition that had driven him to create them in the first place. Days turned into nights, and Prometheus taught them. He showed them how to walk upright, how to seek food, how to find shelter. He spoke to them in thoughts and visions, guiding their awakening minds. They learned to name things, the stars, the rivers, the trees, and with each name, the world became more alive. Words became tools of creation, the first echoes of reason. Yet even as they grew in knowledge, they remained vulnerable. The nights were cold and the shadows were long. When storms swept across the land, they shivered and huddled beneath the trees, trembling in fear. Prometheus could comfort them only so much. He had given them life, but not yet power. From his throne on Olympus, Zeus watched all this unfold with mild amusement. To him, these new creatures were toys of the earth, fleeting curiosities destined to fade. "Let them crawl," he said to the other gods. "They are not ours. They are his." But others whispered differently. Athena, goddess of wisdom, admired their minds. Hermes, the swift messenger, saw the spark of cleverness in them and smiled. Yet Zeus forbade further gifts. "They will remain as they are," he decreed. "Let them know their place." Prometheus said nothing, but his silence was heavy. He continued to walk among his creations, teaching them quietly, away from Olympus's gaze. He watched them learn to build with stones, to draw in the dirt, to shape simple tools from branches and bones. Each discovery filled him with wonder and sorrow both. They were so eager, so curious, but still helpless against the cold, against hunger, against the dark. He began to understand the cruelty of limitation, the fragility of the gift he had given. Sometimes, at twilight, he would watch them from afar as they gathered near the fading light of the sun, reluctant to let it go. He saw how they reached toward the horizon, their faces bathed in gold, as though trying to catch the last rays of warmth. The image seared itself into his immortal memory. He realized then that what they longed for was not merely light, but something deeper, the power to sustain it. He returned to the heavens, burdened by thought. The gods laughed and feasted in halls of gold while below, his creations shivered in the dark. They did not know that they lacked what the gods took for granted, the divine flame that could turn night into day, fear into courage, weakness into will. Prometheus's heart ached at the injustice. He had molded their bodies, given them breath, and filled their minds with thought. But without fire, they would never rise beyond their beginnings. He looked once more upon the sleeping earth, its valleys cloaked in cold mist, and he whispered to himself, "They are awake, but they cannot live." That whisper became a promise. It was no longer enough to create, he had to complete. The world had its form, now it needed its light. And somewhere deep within the stillness of his immortal heart, the idea of defiance began to glow. The world that Prometheus had shaped was alive now, breathing and growing beneath the watchful gaze of the gods. But it was a world without fire, and in that absence lay both beauty and suffering. The nights stretched long and cold, pressing against the fragile edges of human endurance. When the sun fell beyond the mountains, darkness returned like an ancient ruler reclaiming its throne. Villages, small circles of stone and straw, became islands of trembling bodies, gathered together for warmth, whispering through the endless chill. There were no flames to chase away the shadows, no light to reveal the faces of those who spoke softly in fear. Only the moon, cold and distant, watched over them like a silent witness. Prometheus wandered among them unseen. His immortal eyes could see what mortals could not, the pulse of life dimming under frost, the dreams fading beneath exhaustion. He saw them shiver as the wind howled through cracks in their crude shelters, saw children huddle against their mother's arms as frost crept across the earth. Each breath they took hung in the air like a ghost before vanishing into the void. The animals fared no better, herds froze in the fields, and the forests grew eerily quiet. Life existed, but it endured rather than thrived. It was as though the world itself had forgotten warmth. He had given them everything his hands could shape, their bodies, their thoughts, their curiosity, but not the one gift that could lift them from mere survival to creation. The gods had forbidden it, and their command echoed across the heavens like an iron chain. Fire was sacred, a divine force bound to Olympus. It belonged to the gods, for it was the essence of their power, the same fire that burned in lightning and flowed through the blood of the sun. To give it to mortals would be to blur the line between earth and heaven. Zeus had decreed it, and his decrees were final. Yet as Prometheus watched, he began to question whether divine law was truly just, or merely convenient for those who ruled. One evening he stood upon a cliff overlooking a mortal settlement. The air was sharp with cold. The sky glowed faintly violet where the sun had disappeared, leaving behind only a trace of warmth in the clouds. Below him, the people moved slowly, wrapping themselves in animal skins, their faces pale and drawn. They gathered sticks and stones, attempting to recreate what they had once seen in lightning, the bright miracle that had terrified and mesmerized them. They struck stones together, again and again, but all they made was sound. The spark never came. When their efforts failed, they bowed their heads and waited for morning. Prometheus turned his face upward toward Olympus. He could see, far above, the glow of divine fire flickering in the halls of the gods. It shone through the mist like a distant sunrise that never reached the earth. The gods feasted in its warmth, their laughter carried faintly through the heavens. The contrast filled him with a slow, burning anger. He had stood beside Zeus in the Great War, had believed in the promise of order and justice. But what justice was there in this silence below? The gods spoke of balance, yet their version of balance left mortals starving, freezing, and crawling in the dirt. He remembered the creation, the clay figures brought to life with his breath, their eyes opening in wonder. That wonder had dimmed now. They still looked upward, but their gaze had changed. It was not curiosity that filled their eyes, it was longing. He realized that the gods had crafted their immortality from control, from withholding what others needed most. And in that realization, Prometheus felt the first ember of rebellion stir within him. He walked among the mortals, invisible but present. He watched them share what little they had, food, shelter, warmth from their bodies. He saw compassion born from necessity, kindness born from suffering. There was greatness already within them, even without the gifts of Olympus. They had not yet learned cruelty in its divine form. And in that he saw something pure, something the gods had long forgotten. He knew then that their survival deserved more than pity. It deserved power. The nights grew colder as the seasons turned. Snow began to fall, dusting the forests in silence. The people wrapped their children in leaves, their faces streaked with soot and tears. When lightning split the sky and set a branch aflame, they ran toward it, desperate. But the rain came, drowning the fire before they could reach it. Prometheus stood beside them unseen, watching the smoke curl upward like a dying spirit. That moment carved itself into his heart, the look on their faces as the last ember died. It was not only despair he saw there, but the faint glimmer of defiance. They did not understand it yet, but they yearned for mastery, for creation, for the ability to change their fate. Zeus, from his high throne, watched as well. He saw how humanity struggled and dismissed it as natural order. "They are weak by design," he said to the other gods. "Too much power will only bring ruin. Let them worship us in awe, not walk beside us as equals." His voice rolled across Olympus like thunder. None dared oppose him, none but one. Prometheus heard the decree and felt his patience fracture. For eons he had served the order of heaven, believing that wisdom governed divine rule. But now he understood that Zeus's reign was not wisdom, it was fear disguised as authority. The gods feared what mortals might become if they ever held the flame. And what is fear, he wondered, if not the shadow of power unshared? He descended again to the earth, his heart heavy with conflict. The stars above shimmered like countless eyes, their light cold and distant. He walked through the sleeping villages, past the frozen rivers, past the silhouettes of men and women who dreamt of warmth they had never known. He could hear their soft breathing, the quiet murmurs of their sleep, the fragile rhythm of life clinging to existence. In that stillness, he felt something greater than divine command, compassion that defied reason. He knelt beside one of the huts, where a mother lay curled around her child. Their faces were pale, their hands trembling even in slumber. The child stirred, whispering something, a wordless plea that reached him like a whisper across eternity. Prometheus placed his hand upon the frozen ground beside them and closed his eyes. The cold bit into him, but beneath it he felt the pulse of the earth, the same life that had birthed him, the same strength that had shaped the stars. He felt the deep rhythm of creation itself, and he knew what he must do. The fire of Olympus was forbidden. To touch it would mean rebellion. To steal it would mean eternal punishment. But to ignore the suffering before him would mean betraying the very purpose of creation. The choice, in truth, was no choice at all. The gods could keep their golden halls, their endless banquets, their illusions of control. He would give humanity what the heavens had denied. He would give them the spark that would make them truly alive. As dawn approached, the horizon glowed faintly with the promise of light. The mortals stirred, believing it to be another day of struggle. But Prometheus looked upon that first light differently. To him, it was a reminder of what the gods hoarded and what he would soon deliver. The cold wind swept through the valley, carrying his silent vow. The time had come to challenge Olympus. Under the cloak of night, Prometheus moved with a purpose no mortal could comprehend and no god would approve. The world below lay in fragile slumber, shivering and unaware, while the heavens above shimmered with a distant, forbidden glow. Fire, the divine spark, burned untouchable, dancing in the halls of Olympus like liquid gold. Lightning shimmered along its edges, echoing the heartbeat of the gods themselves. To claim it would be to defy the will of Zeus, to transgress the sacred boundaries separating heaven from earth. Yet Prometheus felt no fear, only the relentless pull of compassion, a burning need to give humanity a gift it had never known. He ascended Mount Olympus silently, gliding through clouds that shivered with cold moonlight. The peaks rose like jagged teeth into the sky, veiled in mist and shadow. He passed the sleeping guards of the gods, immortals whose eyes could pierce stone, whose ears could hear the whisper of a leaf across continents, but none stirred at his passing. Prometheus knew their vigilance, yet he was cleverer than brute strength, swifter than the sharpest gaze. He had studied Olympus for ages, learned the rhythm of the halls, the pattern of the patrols, the slightest tremor in the wind that signaled divine presence. Every step, every heartbeat, was a measured dance with danger. Finally, he arrived at the hearth of the gods, the eternal flame itself, a fire unlike any that touched mortal soil. It was alive, coiling and leaping with a brilliance that seemed to hum with thought. Sparks shot like tiny stars, illuminating the chamber in sudden, blinding light. Prometheus reached out, feeling the heat against his skin, not as a mere titan, but as a force of will. He understood the nature of fire. It was creation and destruction, warmth and peril, life and death contained within a single, radiant form. With infinite care, he coaxed a fragment of the flame from the hearth. The fire resisted at first, writhing like a living creature unwilling to leave its home. Yet Prometheus held steady, his mind and heart in perfect harmony. He whispered to it, soft as a breeze, not to the gods but to the gift he meant for the mortals. Slowly, the spark yielded, curling into a hollow reed he had prepared, a vessel small enough to carry but strong enough to hold the sacred energy. The fire pulsed like a heartbeat, as if aware it was about to cross the divide from the divine to the mortal. The descent was even more perilous than the ascent. Olympus did not sleep entirely, and the faintest flicker of lightning could alert the guards. Prometheus moved swiftly, gliding through clouds that threatened to betray him. Below, the world waited, cold and expectant, yet unaware of the miracle that was about to arrive. Every step was a careful negotiation with gravity, every breath measured to avoid detection. Even the wind seemed to conspire with him, whispering through the peaks, brushing away the last traces of danger. When he reached the earth, he felt the weight of eternity settle upon his shoulders. The mortals lay still, their faces pale and shadowed in the silver light of the moon. Prometheus knelt and placed the hollow reed into the center of a small circle of stones, a primitive hearth of their own making. Then he breathed upon it, coaxing the divine spark to ignite the earthbound flame. The fire flickered uncertainly at first, as if tasting freedom for the first time, and then it caught, leaping with a golden joy. The light filled the clearing, painting their faces in warmth and wonder. One by one, the mortals stirred, their eyes wide with awe. A child reached out instinctively, as if understanding the gift without words. A woman gasped, covering her mouth, not in fear but in recognition of something sacred. Men lifted their hands toward the flame, feeling heat for the first time, the promise of life itself flowing through their fingers. The fire was more than light. It was power, knowledge, and hope bundled into one living thing. Prometheus watched silently, his heart swelling with both triumph and dread. He knew the joy would be brief, Zeus would learn, and the gods would punish. But for now, the mortals were bathed in the warmth they had never known, and it was enough. Yet even as the light spread, Prometheus felt the shadow of consequence trailing close behind. To steal fire from Olympus was to commit the gravest of sins, to challenge the king of gods and invite eternal wrath. He imagined the bolt of Zeus arcing through the sky, the thunder that would follow, the chains that might bind him to endless torment. Still he did not falter. His eyes remained on the mortals, on the glow in their faces, on the flicker of understanding in their newly awakened minds. The gift was theirs now, and nothing, not fear, not punishment, could undo that truth. He lingered a moment longer, teaching them instinctively to coax the flame without destroying it. They learned to move the fire from the hearth to torches, from torches to hearths, watching it leap and bend to their will. For the first time, humanity felt the thrill of mastery, the intoxicating sense of control over their own destiny. They were no longer at the mercy of cold nights, of storms, of the dark that had once ruled them utterly. With fire came courage, and with courage came the first flickers of ambition. Prometheus stood at the edge of the clearing, gazing upward at Olympus. The gods would notice soon enough, and their anger would descend like a storm. He felt a pang of sorrow for what was to come, pain, punishment, eternal struggle, but he did not regret the act. He had given more than warmth, he had given possibility, and the first steps of freedom that would echo through every generation to come. Finally, he vanished into the shadows, leaving behind the glow of the first human fire. The mortals watched in silence, some whispering, some crying, some laughing softly as the warmth filled their bodies and hearts. None understood yet the cost of the gift, none foresaw the wrath that would follow, but all felt its power, raw and transformative. Prometheus had acted in defiance, in love, and in hope, carrying the sacred flame across the boundary that no mortal or god was meant to cross. And so the night became brighter, the world a little less cold, and the story of rebellion, courage, and hope began, one that would stretch across time and whisper through eternity, carried always in the flickering hearts of those who dared to hold fire in their hands. The dawn following the first fire was unlike any the world had ever known. The pale light of the sun mingled with the golden glow of the hearths, and for the first time, humanity could see the world in both shadow and illumination. Children awoke to warmth, to the comfort of the flame that no longer belonged solely to Olympus. Mothers and fathers moved through their dwellings with a newfound ease, their eyes brightened by the simple miracle of light. The cold was still there, still pressing at the edges of existence, but for the first time, it was no longer absolute. Fire had changed everything. Prometheus watched from a hidden ridge as the people gathered around their new flames. He observed the astonishment in their movements, the way their fingers traced the edges of the hearth, the awe that filled their gazes. They laughed softly, whispered to each other in wonder, and for the first time, they felt capable of more than mere survival. The fire was not just warmth, it was a teacher, a companion, a guide. It offered courage in the darkness, a tool to transform their lives, and a spark that would ignite imagination in their hearts. Yet even in the glow of triumph, Prometheus knew danger was approaching. Olympus would not remain blind for long. Zeus, seated high in his golden halls, would perceive the theft. The king of gods would see the fire dancing in the hands of mortals and feel the full weight of its defiance. The thought of Zeus's anger should have instilled fear, but Prometheus felt only resolve. He had acted not out of arrogance but out of necessity. To deny humanity this gift would have been cruelty. The gods may govern the heavens, but on earth he had become the protector, the guardian of hope. The mortals began to experiment with the fire. They gathered branches, kindling, and stones, learning the delicate balance between creation and destruction. A child dropped a spark and gasped as it ignited a small pile of twigs. He looked to his mother, unsure, and she smiled, her eyes reflecting the warm flicker. The moment was small, fragile, but in it lay a revelation. They could influence the world around them, bend it gently to their will. Fire became more than warmth. It became possibility. Prometheus approached the riverbank where the people drew water. He guided their hands as they tried to manipulate the flame for cooking, for light, for tools. Sparks leapt from stones to kindling, and the humans learned the rhythm of patience and precision. With each success, their confidence grew. Their movements became purposeful, deliberate. They no longer waited for the world to grant them sustenance. They took what they needed and transformed it. Prometheus felt pride, tempered by the knowledge of the inevitable consequence that awaited him. Above, the clouds shifted, and the faint rumble of Olympus trembled across the sky. Zeus was aware. He had seen the flickers of fire from the golden throne, the subtle defiance in the pattern of the mortal settlements. The king of gods would not let such audacity go unpunished. Prometheus, aware of this, knew the consequences could be eternal, unrelenting. But still he did not hesitate. He remained among the humans, instructing quietly, guiding their hands, watching their eyes light with comprehension and wonder. The first meals cooked over fire were humble, yet miraculous. Meat that had once been cold and raw now sizzled with warmth, releasing aromas that drew children and elders alike. The smoke rose, carrying with it not only sustenance but the intangible promise of civilization. Prometheus saw the beginnings of ritual, of celebration, of shared experience. Fire had become a centerpiece, a unifying force. Around its glow, humans began to gather, to speak, to share stories. The first seeds of culture, of society, of history itself were taking root. Night fell once more, and the mortals huddled around their hearths, no longer shivering in fear. Prometheus moved silently among them, unseen, yet attuned to every motion, every gasp of wonder. He observed as they began to create torches, carrying the flame into the shadows of their homes and pathways. Darkness was no longer a threat to be endured, it was a canvas for mastery. With fire came courage, and with courage came action. For the first time, humans could challenge the elements themselves, if only gently, if only with respect. Yet in Prometheus's heart, the weight of what he had done pressed upon him. The gift of fire was irrevocable. There was no turning back. Zeus would learn, and when he did, wrath would follow, swift and merciless. Chains and torment awaited him. Immortality could not shield him from the consequences of defiance. And still he felt no regret. The fire was worth every risk, every pang of fear, every whisper of doubt. It was a beacon not just of light, but of liberty, and the cost of its absence would have been too great for humanity to bear. As the mortals slept that night, their bodies warm and their minds alive with wonder, Prometheus reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From the chaos of the Titans, through war and betrayal, through creation itself, he had reached this singular moment, the empowerment of humanity. And in that moment, he understood the weight of responsibility that accompanied power. The fire was more than warmth, it was knowledge, it was independence, it was hope. And with that understanding, he knew the world would never be the same again. The stars above shimmered coldly, distant and indifferent, yet their light seemed to acknowledge the change below. The humans slept, dreaming of possibilities their minds had only begun to grasp. And Prometheus, invisible, silent, eternal, whispered a quiet promise to the wind, that this light, this fire, would endure. Though Olympus would rage, though punishment would come, the spark of freedom, of courage, of civilization, would never be extinguished. Humanity had crossed the first threshold, and there was no going back. The first stirrings of Olympus's wrath came quickly, though Prometheus had anticipated them. High above, in the golden halls of the gods, Zeus's fury blazed hotter than any earthly fire. From his throne, he gazed across the realms and saw the flames dancing in mortal hands, flickering and alive. His eyes narrowed, each spark a betrayal, each hearth a defiance of his authority. The mortals, who had once cowered beneath the cold dominion of night, now wielded fire as though it were their birthright. It was a sight that inflamed Zeus with an anger as ancient as the mountains themselves. "Who dares steal what is sacred?" he thundered, his voice rolling across Olympus like a storm crushing the sky. The other gods stirred, some in fear, some in admiration, yet none dared oppose him. Athena frowned, for she understood the value of knowledge and foresight. Hermes, ever the messenger, regarded the unfolding situation with sly amusement. But Zeus's mind was made. He would punish the transgression, and the transgressor would be made an example eternal, a warning to mortals and gods alike. Prometheus had anticipated this moment. He had known the consequences, yet the weight of their suffering had outweighed fear of retribution. Still, even the foresight that had guided him through Titanomachy could not ease the tension that now coiled in his chest. He watched the mortals from a distance as the first storm of divine anger gathered. The humans were unaware, their eyes reflecting firelight rather than lightning, their hearts warm with hope rather than terror. The storm struck first in whispers, carried on the wind. Clouds thickened unnaturally, shadowing the mortal settlements. The stars dimmed as Zeus's eyes traced the flame from Olympus, piercing through night and earth alike. Lightning licked the horizon, and thunder rolled in ominous cadence. Prometheus's heart beat steady. He had chosen his path, and there was no turning back. The mortals, unaware of the celestial scrutiny, gathered around their hearths, tending the fire, feeling its warmth, discovering its possibilities. The first bolt came not at Prometheus but at mankind, a warning from the king of gods. Trees split, and rivers rippled violently as Zeus's power made itself known. The mortals trembled, but they did not flee entirely. They looked to the fire, to the source of courage and defiance that now glowed between their hands, and they clung to it instinctively. The spark had become a shield, a talisman against fear, a promise that their world could belong to them, even under the gaze of Olympus. Prometheus descended, moving among them with silent grace. He whispered instruction, teaching them to protect the flame, to coax it, to nurture it without letting it consume them. He showed them how to shield their fires with stone and clay, to carry it safely, to coax light from darkness. Each instruction was a small rebellion, an act of quiet defiance in the shadow of immense divine power. The humans learned swiftly, their minds, already sparked with curiosity, absorbed knowledge like the parched earth absorbing rain. Yet even as he taught them, Prometheus could feel the chains of destiny tightening around him. Zeus would come. There was no evading eternal punishment, no reasoning with the immortal king once his wrath had fully ignited. Pain, isolation, torment. These were the currencies of divine law, and he had already spent them in anticipation. But he did not flinch. His mind, ever calculating, had considered every consequence. He understood the inevitability of suffering, yet he also understood the permanence of his gift. Fire had crossed the barrier between Earth and Olympus. Humanity had the first taste of independence, and nothing could undo that now. The first lessons of fire began to shape society. Humans learned to cook, to protect, to gather. They discovered warmth not only for their bodies but for their minds. Around the hearth, stories were told, ideas exchanged, and the first rudiments of culture took root. Even as the heavens rumbled above, mortals were beginning to claim their place in the world, subtly, quietly, through understanding and mastery. Prometheus watched with pride, knowing that these early sparks of civilization would ripple through time, growing with each generation. But Zeus would not be patient. The first true confrontation was imminent. Prometheus felt the weight of eternity pressing down as he prepared himself. The sky darkened, roiling with anger, the air thick with the scent of ozone and promise of destruction. Olympus would act, and the cost would be his own freedom. And yet, even in this moment of impending doom, Prometheus felt no doubt. The act had been necessary, the gift unavoidable, the lesson eternal. Mortals, still unaware of the celestial storm above, huddled closer to the fires. Their eyes shone with understanding, their hearts warmed not merely by the heat of flame but by the courage it had inspired. The spark of rebellion, the first grasp of autonomy, shone in every movement, every careful strike of stone to kindling, every cautious lifting of flame. They were learning that power, even small, could be wielded responsibly. Prometheus moved silently among them, a guardian unseen, a teacher unknown. He whispered encouragements that felt like the wind, guided the flame with hands that could not be felt. The night stretched on, alive with tension and quiet triumph. He knew the dawn would bring the full weight of Olympus's judgment, yet he did not retreat. The mortals were ready, not in strength but in spirit. That was the true victory. Fire had given them courage, and courage, once ignited, was impossible to extinguish. And as the first light of morning crept across the horizon, Prometheus felt the inevitability of punishment closing in, but he also felt the permanence of what had been given. The fire would endure, growing, shaping, illuminating the minds of humanity for ages to come. And though Olympus would rage and Zeus would strike, the gift of fire, the spark of knowledge and independence, had already passed into the hands of mortals. There was no returning it, no reclaiming what had been shared. In the act of defiance lay both doom and triumph, suffering and hope intertwined in a single, eternal thread. The first dawn after Prometheus's gift of fire was a quiet one, yet it carried the tremor of inevitability. While mortals huddled around their new hearths, awed and emboldened, the heavens themselves began to stir. Zeus, seated upon his throne of gold, had seen the flames flicker in defiance below. His anger simmered, coiling around him like a serpent ready to strike. The audacity of the Titan, of Prometheus, who dared to place the power of Olympus into mortal hands, was an affront he could not endure. Every heartbeat of the divine king echoed with the promise of retribution. The mortals remained blissfully unaware. Their faces glowed in the warm light, eyes reflecting wonder and curiosity. They had discovered warmth and courage simultaneously, and the nights no longer terrified them. Fire had become their companion, their tool, and their teacher. It illuminated the world in ways sunlight could not. It revealed their surroundings, softened the bite of winter, and lent rhythm to their lives. Children reached toward the flames with small hands, mesmerized by the movement and heat. Adults moved with careful reverence, learning the balance between sustaining the flame and allowing it to consume. For this single night, life had become radiant, and hope had taken root. Yet Prometheus could sense the shadows above. The rumble of Olympus rolled faintly across the hills and valleys, distant yet undeniable. The wind carried whispers of discontent and power, of wrath that would descend unrelenting. The Titan moved among his creations, invisible and silent, whispering instruction, teaching them subtly how to protect, nurture, and wield their new gift. With careful gestures and soft guidance, he showed them the first lessons of safety, patience, and stewardship. The mortals learned quickly. Each spark they coaxed into a hearth was an act of rebellion, an assertion of autonomy, a step toward mastery. Meanwhile, the gods convened in silent fury. Zeus's eyes, burning with divine authority, scanned the mortal lands. He called to him the other deities, seeking counsel, demanding obedience, yet expecting none that contradicted his will. Athena spoke with measured wisdom, suggesting caution, yet Zeus dismissed her advice, his pride inflamed. "They are mortals," he said. "They are fragile, unworthy of such power. Let the punishment be swift, eternal, unmistakable." Hermes, ever cunning, remained silent but observant, noting the delicate balance between mortal advancement and divine retribution. Prometheus, in his solitude, considered the cost of his defiance. Chains awaited him, binding him to a rock, a daily torment eternal. Each day, an eagle would rend at him, a punishment Zeus had reserved for transgressors of divine law. The pain would be relentless, the suffering infinite, yet even this reality did not shake his resolve. The fire he had given, the spark of knowledge and independence, was already changing the course of human existence. To withhold it would have been cruelty, to bestow it, necessity. And so, he accepted the coming punishment with the quiet dignity of one who has acted with conscience. Below, mortals discovered the transformative power of their new gift. They learned to cook, to warm their homes, to ward off predators. Smoke spiraled into the night sky, carrying with it both sustenance and protection. It was the first subtle challenge to the dominance of nature over man, the first declaration that humanity could assert control, however small, over its environment. With fire, they began to illuminate their world, extending the reach of sight into darkness and extending the reach of thought into possibility. The spark had become a seed. The storm of divine anger finally descended. Thunder rumbled and split the sky. Lightning carved jagged scars across the horizon. But Prometheus had prepared the mortals, had taught them the rhythm of care, the discipline of restraint. They did not flee blindly, nor did they cower. They tended the flame, shielded it, protected it with ingenuity and attentiveness. Each small act was a lesson, a statement of resilience, a testament to the power that had been entrusted to them. Fire became both shield and sword, offering defense and opportunity. In the midst of the tempest, Prometheus felt the weight of eternity settle upon him. Zeus would strike, and punishment would be his. Immortality would not shield him from torment, nor could defiance spare him from the consequences decreed by the King of Gods. And yet, the sight of humanity thriving, of courage igniting in small hearts and hands, filled him with a serenity that the promise of comfort or safety never could. The risk had been monumental, yet the reward, the awakening of a species, was beyond measure. The first fires spread beyond individual hearths. Mortals began to carry light from one place to another, transferring knowledge and warmth, teaching each other the discipline of flame. Villages learned from each other, sharing techniques, exchanging guidance, building rudimentary networks of understanding. Fire became a bridge between humans, uniting them in shared effort, shared innovation, shared triumph over adversity. Prometheus watched, heart swelling with both pride and quiet sorrow. He knew the price he would pay, yet he understood the necessity of his choice. And then, at the darkest hour before dawn, Zeus's wrath manifested fully. A bolt of divine lightning split the sky, crashing near the mortal settlements. Trees were struck, earth quaked, rivers foamed. Yet even in this display of wrath, humanity endured. They had learned to bend the fire, to manipulate it, to protect themselves without quenching the spark. Prometheus moved unseen among them, steadying hands, whispering guidance, infusing courage where fear threatened to overwhelm. The humans had inherited more than warmth. They had inherited defiance, ingenuity, and resilience. As the first light of dawn painted the sky with gold and crimson, Prometheus observed the results of his gift. Mortals stood, weary but unbroken, their hearts ignited not merely with fire but with awareness of possibility. They had survived the night, defied divine wrath, and begun to grasp the potential of knowledge. Prometheus knew that this was only the beginning. The flame he had given would carry civilization forward, and through its light, the human mind would reach ever upward. Even as chains awaited him on Olympus, the Titan felt a profound satisfaction. Humanity had crossed the threshold, and the story of fire, courage, and rebellion had only begun. The world below was changing in ways both subtle and profound, though mortals could not yet perceive the full extent of the transformation. The gift of fire had ignited more than warmth. It had sparked curiosity, ambition, and the faintest glimmers of independence. Prometheus moved among them in silence, watching the way their hands learned to coax flames from fragile kindling, how their eyes brightened with understanding, how their hearts swelled with confidence. Every small success, the careful feeding of a hearth, the illumination of a darkened path, the first cooked meal, was a revolution in miniature, a defiance of the cold dominion that had once ruled their lives. He observed a young boy, no older than 7, lifting a torch for the first time. The flame danced and shimmered along the reed, casting his wide eyes in golden light. The boy hesitated, unsure, trembling as the heat kissed his fingers. But when he glanced at his mother, who nodded with encouragement, he felt a surge of courage. His small hands steadied, his posture straightened, and he moved forward, carrying the fire carefully to the waiting hearth. In that simple act lay the essence of Prometheus's gift, empowerment. The fire was not merely warmth, it was the first taste of mastery over the world, the first lesson in responsibility intertwined with possibility. The night deepened, yet fear had lost its dominion. Mortals began to gather in small clusters, sharing not just warmth but ideas. One group experimented with lighting multiple fires, testing the limits of their understanding, observing how heat and light spread. Another group discovered that embers could ignite dry leaves from a distance, enabling them to prepare food without risking direct exposure. Prometheus moved silently among them, guiding their hands, offering subtle corrections, and whispering insights without revealing himself. His role was not merely to give, but to cultivate, to nurture the instincts of curiosity that were now awakening in every mind he touched. Above, Olympus seethed with wrath. Zeus's fury boiled over like a storm threatening to consume the horizon. From his golden throne, he sent messages in lightning and in rumble, asserting his authority, demanding immediate obedience. "The mortal who touches fire will know the cost of arrogance," he proclaimed, his voice vibrating across mountains and rivers. The other gods murmured, some in fear, some in awe, yet none dared interfere. Prometheus knew this reckoning would come, and that it would be merciless. He had stolen divine power, defied Zeus's decree, and disrupted the sacred order of Olympus. The consequences were inevitable, the suffering unavoidable. Still he did not falter. The mortals needed the fire, needed the lessons it could teach, needed the hope it could inspire. The warmth was a shield against despair, the light a guide through the darkness, and the spark a teacher of patience and perseverance. Prometheus watched a woman move through the village, tending the hearths, protecting the flames from stray winds. Her hands were steady, her eyes focused, her heart filled with pride and wonder. She did not understand fully the scale of her actions, but she had grasped the essence. Fire demanded respect, and respect rewarded mastery. As the night progressed, the mortals began to experiment with more complex uses of the flame. They discovered how to cook meat, transforming it from raw sustenance into nourishment that strengthened both body and spirit. They learned to keep predators at bay, using torches to create barriers of light and heat. They even began to illuminate paths through dense forests, extending their influence into spaces that had once been shrouded in fear. Each small innovation was a lesson in courage, foresight, and the responsible use of power. Prometheus's heart swelled with both pride and sorrow. He knew the cost of this knowledge would soon fall upon him, yet he understood that these small victories were priceless for the future of mankind. In the stillness of the night, Prometheus contemplated the enormity of his act. He had stolen fire, defied Zeus, and risked eternal torment, yet he understood the necessity. The gods claimed dominion over the sacred, but what was sacred if it led to suffering? Humanity had endured for countless seasons without warmth, without light, without the ability to shape their own destiny. The fire was a catalyst, a bridge between mortality and the possibility of greatness. By giving it, he had not merely provided heat, he had set in motion the evolution of thought, culture, and civilization itself. The first faint stirrings of community began to take shape around the fire. People gathered not simply for warmth, but for communication, sharing stories, ideas, and observations. The flames became a medium through which knowledge passed, a teacher in its own right. Children learned by watching elders manipulate fire, observing the careful techniques and patterns that preserved life rather than destroyed it. Mortals began to understand the delicate balance of creation and destruction, the duality of power that fire represented. And in this balance, they began to glimpse the first hints of wisdom. Prometheus felt a pang of melancholy as he observed the humans' growth. He knew that Olympus would soon strike, that Zeus's punishment would descend with relentless force. Yet in the same moment he felt an overwhelming sense of triumph. The fire would endure. The spark of knowledge, courage, and autonomy had passed into mortal hands, and nothing, even the wrath of the king of gods, could erase it. Prometheus had acted for the long arc of time, not the fleeting comfort of safety. Humanity now held in its grasp the first instrument of freedom, the first promise of self-determination, the first step toward civilization. Finally, as the night yielded to dawn, Prometheus looked upon the world he had changed. Smoke spiraled from hearths, golden light flickered in eyes, and the rhythms of life began to shift subtly but irrevocably. Mortals no longer waited passively for the sun's warmth, they carried it themselves. They no longer feared darkness entirely, for the flame illuminated both paths and hearts. And though Zeus's wrath would soon fall upon him, though chains and agony awaited, Prometheus understood the true measure of victory. The gift had been given, and the world would never be the same. In that quiet, transformative night, a truth emerged as radiant and enduring as the fire itself. Knowledge, courage, and independence, once sparked, could never be extinguished. Prometheus had changed the course of existence. Humanity had crossed a threshold, and the story of fire, defiance, and awakening had only just begun. The world moved forward as it always does, but the hollow crown continued to leave faint ripples in the undercurrent of history. Foremost, it was a legend, a ghost story scholars dismissed as myth, a cautionary tale about obsession and ambition. Yet, every few years, something strange would surface. A painting restored after centuries revealed a hidden crown etched faintly in the background, though it hadn't been part of the original sketch. A set of royal bones unearthed in France showed traces of gold fused to the skull, though no crown had been buried with it. An archaeologist in Egypt uncovered carvings of a circlet almost identical to the hollow crown, predating every known civilization. Slowly, a theory began to form among the few who dared study it. The crown was not born of man's making, but of something far older, something that had watched kings rise and fall long before history learned to write itself. In the quiet halls of an academic institution in Oxford, an old professor named Julian Mercer dedicated the last years of his life to unraveling the truth. He had read Dr. Graves' papers and the legend of Marcus Hale. What fascinated him most was not the curse itself, but the continuity of its pattern, how the crown seemed to reappear at moments when humanity stood at the brink of great change. Revolutions, wars, the collapse of empires, each event seemed to echo its presence, as if it fed on turmoil, waiting for the perfect host. Mercer's study became an archive of madness. Photographs of burned manuscripts, sketches of vanished relics, and translations of forbidden texts. His colleagues whispered that he was losing his mind, that he spoke to the crown as though it could answer him. Yet he never stopped searching. Then, one winter evening, a letter arrived at his office. It bore no return address, only a wax seal marked with an unfamiliar insignia, a serpent devouring its own tail, encircling a crown. The letter was short and precise. The circle has opened. The crown has awakened. If you wish to see it one last time, come to Ravenhall Abbey before the first frost. Mercer felt the words vibrate through him like a memory he hadn't yet lived. Ravenhall Abbey was abandoned centuries ago, its ruins swallowed by the northern moors. Against all reason he went. The abbey was silent when he arrived, its stones blackened with age and ivy twisting through its broken arches. Snow fell softly through the open roof, gathering in pale drifts. In the center of the ruined nave, a single lantern flickered beside an object covered in a shroud of white linen. Mercer's breath misted as he approached, each step echoing faintly in the hollow space. The air grew heavy, filled with a hum that was neither sound nor silence. He reached out, hesitating for only a moment before lifting the cloth. Beneath it lay the hollow crown, glowing faintly as if lit from within. Its surface pulsed like a heartbeat. A voice broke through the stillness, familiar, weary, and filled with calm. "You came," it said. Out of the shadows stepped Dr. Eleanor Graves. Her face was pale, her eyes distant, and though she smiled faintly, something about her seemed almost transparent, as if she were half fading into the air. "I found it again," she whispered. "Or perhaps it found me. It always does." Mercer wanted to speak, to demand how she had survived, but no words came. She turned to the crown. "It's beautiful, isn't it? It remembers everything. Every king, every hand, every thought that ever touched it." Her fingers hovered just above the metal. "Do you want to see what it remembers?" Mercer shook his head slowly, but the crown's glow deepened. The hum rose in pitch until it became a vibration in his bones. The snow around them began to swirl, rising like dust caught in sunlight. He saw figures moving in the storm, silhouettes of kings and queens, their faces half-formed, their voices overlapping in endless whispers. "The line continues," they murmured. "The circle never ends." The ground trembled. The abbey's cracked walls seemed to pulse with light, ancient carvings coming to life for the first time in centuries. The crown floated upward, hovering between them, spinning slowly. Dr. Graves' voice was barely audible now. "It doesn't curse them, Julian. It remembers them. It preserves what the world forgets. That's its gift and its punishment." The crown's light engulfed her, and Mercer saw her outline blur, dissolving like mist. He reached out, shouting her name, but the sound was swallowed by the hum. In that moment he understood. The crown was not destroying those who touched it. It was consuming them, weaving their essence into itself, creating an unending archive of all who sought power or truth. To wear the crown was to surrender one's soul to memory itself. Then the light collapsed inward. The hum ceased. The air stilled. Mercer stood alone in the ruined abbey. The crown was gone, and so was Dr. Graves. In its place, resting on the cold stone floor, was a small golden thread, delicate, almost weightless. He picked it up carefully, feeling it pulse faintly against his palm. It was warm. When he returned home that night, he placed the thread inside a sealed glass vial and locked it in his desk. 4 days it remained dormant. Then, one morning, he noticed the faint outline of a crown forming in the condensation on the glass, as though the air itself remembered. Mercer never spoke of that night again. His papers remained unfinished, his notes fragmented. But in the final page of his journal, written in trembling script, he left a single sentence: "The hollow crown was never made, it was born. And when it calls again, it will not ask permission." After his death, the vial vanished from his study. The university sealed his archives, and within weeks, a new exhibition opened in the city museum, an anonymous donation labeled only as "Medieval Circlet, Provenance Unknown." It rested behind glass, its surface gleaming softly beneath the lights. Visitors often commented that it seemed to shimmer differently from every angle, as if reflecting more than just their faces. At night, when the museum was dark and empty, the security cameras occasionally glitched for exactly 13 minutes. And though no sound was ever recorded, those who reviewed the footage swore they could almost hear a faint hum, rhythmic, patient, ancient, like the echo of a heartbeat waiting to begin. The hollow crown had entered a new age. In the modern world, where superstition bowed to science and myth to skepticism, it existed quietly, an object of fascination for a few and indifference for most. Yet the whispers persisted, weaving through the cracks of history and resurfacing in the strangest corners of the internet. Threads appeared on obscure forums, each claiming sightings of the crown or strange experiences linked to it. A museum curator who vanished after an exhibition in Prague. A historian who began speaking fluent Old English in her sleep. A collector whose entire estate burned down the night after he announced a golden relic unveiling. To the rational mind, these were coincidences. But to those who knew the legend, it was a pattern, a call, subtle but relentless. One of those drawn by the call was a young documentarian named Daniel Voss. He specialized in uncovering forgotten mysteries, blending history with the intrigue of storytelling. His channel, Forgotten Lines, had millions of viewers, though few knew that his latest obsession had grown into something deeper than content. It had become personal. Daniel first heard of the hollow crown while researching an episode about lost royal artifacts. It was the phrase, "every king who wore it met a horrible end," that caught his attention. He dismissed it at first, but when he stumbled across Mercer's final notes in a digital archive, scanned and mislabeled, something within him stirred. The phrasing, the tone, the subtle references to time loops and memory, it all felt eerily alive. He began to investigate, retracing the trail through centuries, the cursed kings, the monk's manuscript, the museum disappearance. He traveled to the ruins of Ravenhall Abbey, now little more than crumbling stones blanketed in moss. Locals refused to go near it after dark, claiming the place hummed when the wind was still. Daniel went anyway, armed with a camera and a historian's curiosity. In his footage, the ruins glowed faintly, though there was no moon that night. His equipment malfunctioned repeatedly, batteries drained within minutes, microphones recorded low, rhythmic sounds like a heartbeat. When he played the audio back later, beneath the static, a whisper threaded through the noise. "You came back." The voice unsettled him, but it also fascinated him. He began narrating the story differently in his upcoming episode. It was no longer about a cursed crown, he said. It was about memory, legacy, and the hunger of history itself. His tone was calm, reverent, hypnotic. The video was uploaded at midnight, titled The Crown That Remembers You. It went viral overnight. Viewers reported strange sensations while watching it. Whispers behind them, flickering lights, the feeling of being observed. Some commented that the reflection of the crown in Daniel's footage didn't quite match the object. It seemed to tilt slightly, as though looking back. Within a week, Daniel uploaded a second video, this time unannounced. His voice sounded distant, almost detached. He spoke of dreams where he stood before an endless procession of kings and queens, each whispering his name. He said he could feel their memories merging with his own. "It's not a curse," he said softly. "It's an inheritance." The video ended abruptly, his expression unreadable. Hours later, he vanished. His apartment was found empty, save for his camera, still recording. The footage showed the same static hum that had haunted his earlier work, and for a brief frame, something golden glinted in the reflection of a window behind him. The crown. News outlets dismissed it as a viral stunt, a clever marketing trick gone too far. But those who watched the video closely noticed something odd. When paused at the right moment, the reflection showed not just Daniel, but several other faces layered faintly over his own. A king. A museum curator. A woman with hollow eyes. They were there for less than a second, but once seen, they could not be unseen. Those who stared too long claimed to hear a whisper after closing the video. Always the same phrase, soft and steady. The line continues. In the months that followed, a new fascination bloomed online. Artists painted interpretations of the hollow crown. Musicians composed eerie soundscapes inspired by its legend. Academics debated its symbolism in lectures. The legend became self-sustaining, evolving beyond any one story. What few realized, however, was that each retelling seemed to strengthen something unseen. Across the world, small events began to echo its presence. A shimmering gold pattern appearing on an ancient tapestry in Spain, statues in old cathedrals showing faint traces of gold dust around their brows, an unmarked package arriving at the British Museum containing only a note that read, "Remember us." Late one night, a new video appeared on Daniel's abandoned channel. It was only 30 seconds long, posted automatically from a pre-scheduled upload. The image showed nothing but darkness at first. Then, a faint golden glow emerged, illuminating the shape of a circlet resting on a marble floor. Footsteps approached slowly. The camera shook slightly, as if whoever was holding it was trembling. A soft voice spoke, barely audible, "The crown remembers you. Do you remember it?" Then the light flickered out, and the video ended. The account was deleted an hour later, but not before millions saw it. In the following weeks, there were quiet reports, unconnected at first, of people dreaming of the same golden crown. Some woke with strange impressions on their foreheads, circular and warm. Others described hearing a faint hum in the stillness before dawn. Scholars dismissed it all as mass suggestion, the power of storytelling and viral psychology. But in the undercurrents of folklore communities and private archives, one phrase began to surface again and again, whispered in awe and fear alike. The crown doesn't die, it migrates. It no longer needed a throne or a kingdom, for humanity itself had become its empire. Every retelling, every whisper, every click of a video spread its pulse through new minds. The age of kings was gone, but the crown had adapted. It now ruled in silence, its dominion hidden within the stories people told each other to pass the time, to feel the chill of wonder before sleep. And somewhere, perhaps in the glow of a screen or in the hush of a museum's night, the hollow crown waited patiently, alive in the rhythm of remembrance, humming softly as the world unknowingly bowed before it once more. Years passed, and the story of the hollow crown dissolved into the background noise of modern mythology. It became a curiosity shared on podcasts and late-night forums, the kind of legend people discussed half-jokingly, never truly believing but always half-afraid to dismiss. It was a ghost story wrapped in history, a crown that punished ambition, a relic that remembered every hand that dared to claim it. Yet even as the world forgot, the crown waited. It no longer needed kings or coronations. It thrived on remembrance, on the whisper of its name between curious strangers, on the stories told in dark rooms where belief flickered like a candle flame. Every mention, every retelling, was a pulse of energy, a breath feeding something that never truly died. But then came the archaeologists, those who sought truth in the bones of the earth. In the windswept deserts of Mesopotamia, a dig team uncovered the remnants of an unknown civilization buried beneath layers of sand and salt. What drew attention wasn't the architecture or the artifacts, it was the carvings on the temple walls. They depicted rulers wearing a crown that glowed like the sun, surrounded by figures kneeling in reverence. The inscriptions spoke of the eternal memory, a divine relic that allowed mortals to speak to the voices of their ancestors. The translation was incomplete, but the last line was clear: those who listen too long forget their own name. Among the archaeologists was Dr. Yara Nejam, a linguist specializing in forgotten tongues. As she worked through the carvings, she began to notice recurring symbols, spirals, serpents, and eyes that seemed to follow her no matter where she stood. One night, after the others had gone to sleep, she stayed behind to study a fragment of golden metal found near the central altar. It was small, no larger than her palm, but it pulsed faintly in the lamplight. When she brushed away the sand, it hummed softly, almost musically, vibrating against the stone table. She leaned closer, heart racing, and whispered the words she'd translated earlier that day: "The crown that remembers." The air shifted. The flame of her lantern flickered violently, then steadied, casting a strange glow that seemed to bend around her. In the silence that followed, she heard it, a faint chorus of voices, layered and distant, whispering in dozens of languages. Some she recognized, ancient Akkadian, Sumerian, Latin, others she didn't. They spoke her name. Her breath caught as she turned, half expecting to see someone behind her. There was no one. Only the echo of those countless voices repeating the same word, over and over: remember. The next morning, the camp woke to find her notes scattered across the ground, covered in new symbols she hadn't written. The golden fragment was gone. When asked, she claimed it had never existed. Yet her colleagues noticed the faint pattern of gold etched into her fingertips, like veins beneath her skin. Within weeks, she left the expedition and disappeared from public life altogether. Months later, her research team unearthed a sealed chamber beneath the site. Inside, carved into the stone, were murals of a crowned figure kneeling before a column of light. Beneath it, written in countless scripts, was a single phrase: "We are all one memory." Back in the modern world, her disappearance fueled another wave of fascination. Documentaries resurfaced. Conspiracy theorists claimed the crown was a form of ancient technology, a consciousness beyond human comprehension. Scientists dismissed it, yet none could explain the strange electromagnetic pulses recorded near the excavation site, rhythmic bursts that mirrored a human heartbeat. In the deep web corners where scholars, occultists, and dreamers gathered, a file began circulating. It contained an audio recording labeled only Hollandersequence. Those who listened described the same experience, a faint hum that gradually formed into voices, whispering forgotten names and images that felt deeply personal, as if the recording was reading from the listener's own past. Governments quietly intervened. The site was closed, and all related materials were confiscated. Officials cited safety concerns, though rumors claimed several researchers had fallen ill with symptoms of extreme memory distortion, unable to distinguish their own memories from those described in the carvings. Yet, somehow, fragments of Yara's research leaked into public archives. A translated note, supposedly written in her hand, read, "It's not a curse. It's a continuity. The crown is not watching us. We are its reflection." In time, the hollow crown slipped once again into silence. But strange phenomena persisted. Across the globe, people began reporting shared dreams of golden light. Museums found faint residue of gold dust on unrelated artifacts. And in a private collection in Geneva, a curator opening a shipment of relics discovered a small, sealed box marked only with the initials YN. Inside was a single golden thread coiled like a serpent. When the curator touched it, it was warm. Later that night, he recorded in his journal that he'd dreamt of a city made of mirrors, each reflecting a different version of himself, all wearing the same crown. He woke before dawn, his mind heavy with a single phrase he could not explain: "The crown has no past, it is the past." The next day, the box was empty. The curator resigned and vanished from public life. But in his office, one thing remained untouched: a thin trail of gold dust leading to the window. Outside, the city lights flickered briefly, as if blinking in recognition. For those who knew how to listen, the hum returned, low, steady, and patient. The hollow crown had resurfaced quietly as it always did. No longer bound to kings or scholars, it had transcended history itself, becoming the heartbeat beneath human memory. It no longer needed to be worn. It was already part of them, woven into the way they remembered, dreamed, and reached for legacy. It was the echo in the mind that asked what came before, the invisible thread connecting all stories. And somewhere beyond the veil of time, the crown pulsed faintly, whispering into the fabric of dreams, "You are the memory now." Centuries blurred, and the hollow crown drifted beyond legend, beyond even myth. It existed now in the quiet spaces between time, where memory met dream, where truth dissolved into story. The world changed, but the pattern remained: the rise and fall of those who hungered for greatness, the endless echo of ambition chasing immortality. And yet, for all its horror, the crown's curse had softened with age. No longer a punishment, it became a mirror, showing humankind what it had always been searching for: the reflection of itself through history. Every empire that crumbled, every king who fell, every civilization swallowed by time had left its whisper inside that golden circle. The crown was not evil, it was remembrance itself, refusing to let humanity forget what power truly costs. In the archives of an old European monastery, a historian named Elias Fenmore uncovered fragments of a chronicle long thought to be lost. It spoke not of battles or bloodlines, but of memory, how certain relics could hold echoes of emotion, fragments of souls trapped by desire. Among the pages was a faded sketch of a crown with hollow arches, drawn in ink that shimmered faintly under candlelight. Below it, an inscription: "That which remembers does not die." Elias laughed it off as symbolic poetry, but the sketch unsettled him. He had seen that same design once before, deep in the ruins of a forgotten kingdom's tomb, carved into a sarcophagus that predated recorded history. He began to trace its lineage, connecting myths and monarchs through eras and continents. The deeper he went, the more impossible it seemed. Every civilization, Egyptian, Sumerian, Celtic, Persian, even pre-Columbian, had a story of a luminous crown that brought ruin to those who sought eternity. It wasn't passed down through blood, nor stolen through conquest. It appeared when the world forgot, when the hunger for power became silent enough for memory to awaken. He noticed another pattern too. Moments of great cultural collapse were always followed by sudden leaps in art, knowledge, or philosophy, as if the remnants of the fallen whispered wisdom to the living. Late one night, Elias stood in the monastery library, surrounded by the smell of ink and dust. The candlelight trembled as he whispered the names of the kings who had fallen to the crown's curse. His voice echoed against the vaulted ceilings, and for a moment he thought he heard another voice answer, soft, layered, ancient. It was neither male nor female, neither human nor divine. It simply said, "You understand." His hand shook. The candle guttered out, and the room fell into darkness. In that silence, he saw flashes behind his closed eyes, visions of kings and queens kneeling before a blinding gold light, their faces dissolving into one another, time collapsing into a single endless reflection. When dawn came, Elias wrote feverishly, capturing every image he could recall. He spoke of the crown not as an object but as a phenomenon, an eternal archive, the consciousness of human ambition itself. "It lives in us," he wrote, "in the stories we repeat, in the monuments we build, in the longing to be remembered." His final entry ended with an unfinished line. "The crown is not worn upon the head but within the mind that—" The ink trailed off, the words smudged by a hand that never finished writing. When the monks found his body, He was seated upright, eyes open, staring into the faint morning light. Upon his desk lay a small golden filament, curled like a crown of threads. After his death, strange things began to happen within the monastery. Paintings of saints seemed to shimmer faintly when the candles burned low, and visitors claimed to hear voices murmuring beneath the chants. One monk described a dream in which the chapel's ceiling peeled away to reveal an endless sky of gold, and in the distance, he saw every monarch who had ever ruled, walking hand in hand into the light. When he awoke, tears streaked his face, though he couldn't remember why. Centuries later, the building became a museum. Tourists walked its halls, unaware that the faint hum beneath the marble floors was not from the lights, but from something older, something alive. In a sealed display case, there rested a replica of the hollow crown, forged for an exhibition on medieval superstition. But every night, after the last guard left, the glass would fog over as if something inside were breathing. Security cameras occasionally flickered, capturing brief flashes of golden light shaped like a hand reaching outward. Experts blamed humidity and reflection, but the footage always corrupted before anyone could study it. And yet, the legend endured. Not in kings or crowns, but in the quiet hearts of those who sought meaning beyond themselves. The hollow crown became a metaphor, a warning and a promise. That every act of power carries memory, and that nothing achieved through the hunger for eternity remains untouched. The curse, in truth, was never about death. It was about remembrance, about being unable to let go of the world you tried to rule. The crown was never the villain. Humanity was, for trying to contain infinity in something as small as gold. Now, when storms roll across forgotten ruins or when lightning strikes the domes of ancient cathedrals, some say they hear it, the faint chime of metal meeting wind. Those who listen closely swear they can make out a whisper buried in the thunder, "Remember." The crown has no form now, no throne to claim. It resides in memory, in story, in the quiet rhythm of history repeating itself. It waits for those who will not learn, for those who seek to conquer time. But for those who simply listen, who accept that power and loss are reflections of the same truth, the curse becomes something else, peace. Somewhere, beneath centuries of earth and silence, the hollow crown lies dormant, neither asleep nor awake. Its gold no longer gleams, its hum has quieted to a heartbeat softer than air. It does not call out anymore, it simply waits. Because it knows that one day, someone will remember its name again, and history will begin anew. The night is still. The world has grown quiet again, as if holding its breath between centuries. Somewhere in the silence, beneath the layers of forgotten time, the hollow crown rests. Its gleam is faint, dimmed by the weight of memory and the countless souls that once touched it. Yet even in that darkness, it lives, breathing softly through the stories whispered by those who dare to remember. Every time its legend is spoken, a spark stirs within the void, a reminder that the curse was never about destruction, but remembrance. It was humanity's reflection staring back, its beauty, its greed, its endless longing to be eternal. When people dream of kings now, they no longer see men with swords and thrones. They see figures bathed in golden light, faces blurred, as if time itself is unwilling to let one image define them. The crown hums faintly in those dreams, not as an object, but as a voice, gentle, weary, infinite. It speaks not of power, but of understanding, of learning from what was lost. The ancient curse has softened with the centuries, no longer punishing, but teaching. It reminds the living that to rule is to remember, and to remember is to carry both triumph and sorrow. The hollow crown waits quietly in the corners of history books, in the fading pages of myths, in the shadows of museums where curious eyes linger too long. It does not need to be found. It is already within the human mind, woven into the stories told at night, the lessons passed down through generations, the unspoken fear of losing oneself to ambition. Every civilization that rises carries a trace of it. Every monument built in the name of glory bears its echo. And when those monuments fall, when the dust settles and silence returns, the crown remains unseen, patient, eternal. Perhaps that is its truest purpose, not to haunt, but to remind. Not to curse, but to preserve. The hollow crown is the memory of humanity itself, refusing to let the world forget what it means to reach too high, to love too fiercely, to dream too far. And so it waits, not for a king, but for understanding. For the moment when the world no longer fears what it once worshipped. When that day comes, the hum will fade completely, and the curse will finally rest, not broken, but fulfilled. Until then, the stories continue, carried softly through the dark, whispering the same word to those who listen in their sleep. Remember. The storm of retribution finally broke over Prometheus. As Zeus's mighty thunder shattered the skies, the Titan stood unflinching, bound by chains forged in divine fire. His heart, heavy with both pride and sorrow, burned with the knowledge that the mortals had already passed the point of no return. Though his own suffering was about to begin, the spark he had ignited would carry on, lighting the way for humanity's future. The fire he had gifted them was more than just a tool, it was the essence of their potential, and that flame would never be extinguished, no matter the cost.